Welcome everyone to Hogvillenet YouTube Live. We've been doing this all year post game. We did some pre games earlier in the year, but mostly kept it to post game throughout the season. But now we have a post regular season, post SEC tournament. It's the big one. It's win or go home at this point. It's the NCAA tournament. It's Selection Sunday. And I know fans have been disappointed with these Arkansas Razorbacks the way they finished the season. Had some good moments during the year, but not enough of those, especially down the stretch, losing 4 of their last 5 games, 6 of their last 9. But Arkansas did just enough. When you look at the full body of work, the Hogs were pretty much never in doubt. They were going to have to take a bad loss, a second bad loss somehow late in the season. And when you looked at how the games kind of filled in on the schedule at the end of the year, it was all quad one games. It worked out that way in both SEC tournament games. The Hogs split those. They do pick up a win against Auburn. I think that probably salvaged Arkansas as an 8 seed. They might have still gotten in as an 8, probably a 9, though, I think, if they'd have lost that first round game. But the Arkansas Razorbacks, NCAA tournament selection committee puts Arkansas in as an 8 seed. That's what all the projections were telling us coming into Sunday. And Arkansas is going to be playing its first round game on Thursday in Des Moines, Iowa, in technically the West region, but it's the Illinois, from the Big Ten. This is a team, when I'm looking at the matchups numerically and statistically, a lot of it looks very similar. And you probably expect that with the teams that are graded this way. 8 and 9 seeds, kind of middling, when you look at the bracket seedings. Arkansas, by the way, for the third consecutive season, has made the NCAA tournament. 3 of the last of the first 4 years, excuse me, or after the missing it the first season under Eric Musselman, the last 3. If you go back in time just a little bit, Arkansas now has made the NCAA tournament 6 times in the last 9 years. So after having that drought and having some really rough patches, Arkansas has become a regular in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, you don't want to have gaps in there, and Arkansas's got 3 in a row. It's the 4th year in a row that Arkansas has won 20 games under Eric Musselman. And we don't even know the year that they didn't go if Arkansas would have won enough in the SEC tournament. They might have needed to run the table that year. They won that first Wednesday game. They were going to have to win 5 games in 5 days. But COVID stopped all of that. So, that's a year that everybody missed. But at any rate, the Razorbacks are in the dance. And I know a lot of fans were thinking, I see some Razorback fans on message boards, social media talking about, maybe this team didn't deserve it. The eye test tells me what I saw at the end of the year. This feels like, and I watched a lot of basketball over the years, like many of you have. It kind of looks and feels more like an NIT quality. But the tournament is based on a full body of work. Arkansas is not playing very well of late. When you look at the whole arc of it, Arkansas did very well. 3rd place finish in Maui. San Diego State gets a 5 seed. That's a quality quad one win for the Razorbacks back in Maui. It's a mid-major, probably the number 1 mid-major in the country, unless you still consider Gonzaga a mid-major. But San Diego State's a good team, also dancing. And then I think, when I look at some of Arkansas's quad one wins, they're only 4, but 3 of those were away from home. And so I think there's a little more advantage there. I think there's a little bit more to it when you go away from home and prove you can win some of those games. The only quad one win at home was defeating Texas A&M. The Aggies, by the way, lost to Alabama today in the SEC tournament championship. But the Aggies moved into the net top 20. They're at 18. They're ranked 18th in the last AP poll. Arkansas split during the regular season with the Aggies. We know that's who defeated Arkansas in the quarterfinals on Friday. So Arkansas's got that. That's the only quad one win Arkansas got at home. The other ones were away. Auburn in this SEC tournament. I mentioned San Diego State back in November, and then Kentucky on the road in early February. That's Arkansas's best win of the year, in my opinion, not just because it was a road game against the top 25 net team, but also because Arkansas really put things together at both ends of the floor that night. It was the best game of the year for many reasons, but that's what the resume looked like. That's what the selection committee was looking at. 8 SEC teams made the dance. We expected that based on the various bracketologies. Mississippi State was the one that was on that cut line, but I felt like that team was going to get in. I really did, and I thought, beating Florida in the first round of the SEC tournament, that was a game that it doesn't add much quality to your resume, but if you lose it, it's probably enough to keep you out. Maybe not, but I think it would have. But at any rate, the Mississippi State makes it in as one of the play-in 11 seeds. That probably tells you right there they needed to beat Florida. And so that's in the Midwest. The Midwest bracket has 3 SEC teams. Arkansas is the only SEC team in the West. The other 7 teams share their region with at least one other SEC team. The Midwest has 3. I mentioned Mississippi State is a play-in 11. Also in that bracket is Auburn as a 9, Texas A&M as a 7. Alabama's the number 1 overall seed for the entire tournament. Going to get to play close to home in Birmingham to open things up as the 1 in the South. You've also got Missouri in the South as a 7 seed. And then when you look at the East, Tennessee, who a lot of people thought would be on the 3 line, Tennessee got bumped down to the 4 line. Kentucky's in the East as well as a 6. So you see the SEC all over the place, except in the West. Arkansas is the lone league team there. And I've been saying for a while, I think when Arkansas gets away from SEC competition, teams that know this team because they're in the same league and they play them, some of them multiple times, it's probably a good thing. And now Arkansas, just depends on what you think they're going to do. But whatever they do, they wouldn't see an SEC team potentially until the Final Four. So that's just the way it is. And the bracket's not easy. Kansas is the number 1, the 3rd overall number 1 seed on Arkansas in Arkansas's bracket. These teams are all playing. Kansas against 16 seed Howard, Arkansas and Illinois. They all play on Thursday in Des Moines. So the winners of those games will play on Saturday in the round of 32 in Des Moines. And then on their part of the 16-team West Region bracket, they'll play the winner of that foursome that I just went through. Will play the winner of these 4. UConn, the 4 seed that plays Iona, Rick Pitino and Iona, and then the 5 seed St. Mary's West Coast team against Virginia Commonwealth, the 12 seed. So 5-12, 4-13 in that part on this part of the bracket. So the winner that emerges from those 4 teams will play the winner from Arkansas's portion, which is also Illinois, Kansas, and Howard. And those teams would meet in the Sweet 16. And then the other part of the West bracket, just going to go through it real quick. And these are games that are played in Denver and Sacramento. Friday game, 6 seed TCU against 11 seed. This is a play-in, a first 4 play-in that'll be determined early this week. Arizona State and Nevada will face TCU as an 11 seed versus the 6. 3-seeded Gonzaga, makes sense, they're in the West region. These are games in Denver, by the way, against the 14 seed Grand Canyon. And those games will be played Friday. On Thursday in Sacramento at 7 seed Northwestern, finished 2nd in the Big Ten against Boise State, a 10 seed. Eric Melsman at Nevada is familiar with Boise State. And then you've got the 2 seed at the bottom of this bracket, UCLA. This is obviously one of the top teams in the country. 29-5. This is a really good team, obviously. Against North Carolina Asheville as the 15 seed. Arkansas beat Asheville back in non-conference play at home. And so there you have it. Those are your 16 teams in the West region. Now, those latter 8 that I talked about, they're on the other half of the bracket where I mentioned the teams that would meet in the Sweet 16, the top 8, and on the top part of the bracket, those 8 teams, these 8 will compete to also 2 of them will get to the Sweet 16, and then the winners of those, I know I'm kind of rambling here, will play for the region championship, also known as the Elite 8. And so those things, that's how it happens. That's what your regional championship game is your Elite 8 matchup to then advance to the Final Four. It's a long way to go for Arkansas. It's a program that's been to back-to-back Elite 8s under Eric Melsman, finishing with final national top 10 rankings. I always talk about it. They're 6-2, then spanning the last 2 NCAA tournaments. I talked about in the SEC tournament, Arkansas has never lost under Melsman in its opener. So 4-0 before, losing. Now they also don't ever do better than 1-1 under Muss in the SEC tournament, but they always win the opener. Well, it's a smaller sample size in terms of how many tournaments, only 2 versus 4 in the SEC tournament, only 2 NCAA to look at the last 2 years, but a lot of games because Arkansas not only wins its opener, it wins its second round game, and it advances to the Sweet 16 and has won those games. Arkansas has always been a higher bracket seed, top 8. When you look at a 16-team bracket, 1 through 8 are your higher seeds. Obviously, 9 through 16 are the lower. So Arkansas has always been in the higher seeding in the bracket, 3rd year in a row. But they've had better seeds as a 3. And what was it last year? I think it's 6, or was it a 7? I think it was a 6. They played Vermont at any rate, Arkansas is an 8. So you know what happens if you win that 8-9 game. You likely are going to get Kansas a 1 seed in that round of 32. When I was watching the selection show today, Jay Wright, a Hall of Fame coach, we know what he did at Villanova. He's now a college basketball analyst with CBS. Right after the West Region bracket was announced, he chimed in and said he liked Arkansas against Illinois, and he likes the matchup. If Arkansas to win, Kansas is expected to win. If the Jayhawks and Razorbacks get together in that round of 32, he talked about Arkansas's size, length, quickness. He just basically said he liked the matchup. He referenced Nick Smith being in the fold now. So we'll see. I mean, that's just one opinion, but it was one that came out early as this bracket was announced. But when you look around at it, Arkansas is 0-5 all time against Illinois. They haven't played since 04-05. And really they played 5 times. I mentioned 0-5. Most of those games, I think a few of them there, a couple of them were played in North Little Rock. We know Arkansas hasn't been great there. But those games were played at a stretch where Arkansas wasn't really at its best. That may sound like an excuse, but the program was down. Illinois is a proud program. When you look at it overall, Illinois' NCAA tournament resume might surprise people. It's been a good basketball program. But the games, again, were played neutral site, Chicago, North Little Rock, and they've been so long ago, over 18 or so years ago, that there's not much to glean from that. But I mentioned Illinois in the NCAA tournament. This will be their 33rd appearance. It's Arkansas's 35th. When you look at, I believe Illinois has 42 wins in the NCAA tournament all time. Arkansas's got 48. The Illini have 4 Final Fours. Arkansas's got 6. We know 4 of those only in the modern era. I need to go back and look at the years for Illinois, but I know it's relatively close there. But when you really start looking at Arkansas' success over time, 11 Elite Eights, 13 Sweet 16s, and a lot of wins in the NCAA tournament. And we know that even though I mentioned the track record in recent years, especially under Musselman, Illinois is also playing in its 3rd consecutive NCAA tournament under Brad Underwood. So there's some similarities when you look at track record there. I think obviously Arkansas's outperformed Illinois once they got into the tournament. That's obvious. Last year, the Illini, I think they struggled in their first round game. I'm trying to remember the opponent. It might have been Chattanooga, but they struggled there. Lost to Houston. We know Houston's one of the top programs now in college basketball, especially tournament time. But Illinois hasn't quite lived up to some of its NCAA tournament seedings in the last few years, whereas Arkansas has, and in some, and you could say maybe exceeded expectations for a program that just hadn't won at that level and advanced that far, going back to the previous century. But, this is a different season, and these teams, when I look at some of the players for Illinois, we're going to go through we're going to talk about some of Arkansas's problem areas. But once again, welcome. Thank you for joining me. It's Hogvillenet YouTube Live. We're doing this as a sort of a Selection Sunday special, just really kind of looking at Arkansas getting to the tournament. And I'm going to give you my opinion. When I look at net rankings, Arkansas's 21, by the way. Illinois is 34, I think, the final net. When I look at net, last year LSU was that team that once things started going downhill, no matter how much that team lost, they seemed to have a strong net. And Arkansas was playing from behind on net against that team with a much better conference season and, some other things. But sometimes net just works that way. A lot of what goes into net is it's better to have quality losses than some blowout wins over some bad teams in non-conference. That sometimes makes sense. But when you put it all together, how many quality wins do teams really have versus the quality losses? At some point, I get tired of seeing quality losses, and I don't care that a team in their non-conference back in November maybe beat up on 3 or 4 quad 4 teams instead of smartly scheduling some blowouts against some quad 3s, because those things can really swing net. And so even though that's the way it works and the way that it's set up, then shame on teams for not scheduling smarter. But at the same time, what does my eye test tell me? And sometimes some of these teams are playing better at the end of the year than others. This is one of those seasons where Arkansas is not one of those teams. I do, however, think Arkansas belongs in this event. I believe Arkansas deserves it based on the full body of work. There's no question about it. As an 8 seed, that's what the analytics said it would be, and that's what the selection committee said it would be. And the selection committee uses net and some of the other analytics as priority determining factors. Not everything, but it's a big part of it. So I think when I look at it, I'm thinking maybe Arkansas. What I see it, I mentioned earlier in this, Arkansas kind of to me looks like a team in these last 9 or so games after Kentucky, the last 9 games, they look more like an NIT kind of team to me. But what does that mean? I mean, to me, over the years when I've seen teams that get to the NIT, they were those teams in quality games and tougher games against better opponents. They couldn't quite get over the hump, whether they had big leads and folded like Arkansas does, or just hung in close enough it couldn't close out. Those kind of things when they just recur. So sometimes record isn't necessarily as much what I'm looking at is what does the team look like? Having said all that, the overall resume, not just separating out the 9 games, Arkansas definitely deserves to be there. In my opinion, if they're not an NIT team and they're an NCAA tournament team, maybe they deserve exactly what they got as an 8 seed because there's not a huge difference between the 8-9 line. And really this year, when I look at some of these teams, there's probably not a big difference between some of those and some of the 10 and 11. So Arkansas's in a group there. And you can't really, when you look at the net, it's strong, 21. Even Oklahoma, the team that fell apart this year, especially in its own conference, that's still it's a quad 2 win for Arkansas on a neutral site. You look at what Arkansas did, not on the road. They weren't good on the road except for that Kentucky win. But at neutral sites, they're 4-2. And if you count North Little Rock over a conference champion, Missouri, a mid-major, but a good mid-major conference, Missouri Valley Conference, Bradley, they were 5-2 in true neutral site games. The committee didn't evaluate it that way. They treated that as a home game. But just what I'm looking at when I start breaking all of it down, Arkansas was so close. I think this is another thing that's a feather in Arkansas's cap. They were close in a lot of games but they were road games. This will be a little different being neutral site. And so I know they just had a close game against A&M in a neutral site and lost it. That same thing happened with Creighton. But in these other games, San Diego State, close one. We talked about Oklahoma, that 10-point win. So relatively close. Arkansas kind of stretched a double-digit lead late there. Bradley was a blowout. But some of these games, Louisville was a blowout. That was a high major school, but not a good ACC school this year. One of the worst. I think it's the worst season maybe in that program's history. But those were what the neutral site look was for Arkansas. And so even going 1-1 in the SEC tournament is a positive relative to losing your last 3 games going into that tournament. So getting that win over Auburn, building a 13-point lead. Arkansas's had 2 double-digit leads against A&M, by the way, this season and lost. And both of those games were away from Fayetteville. Arkansas won by double digits, 11 points, when they played the Aggies in Fayetteville. So, that's a team that's a 7 seed, though. This isn't as good as A&M was in conference. They weren't very good in non-conference. And that seeding's probably about right. Missouri got a 7 seed. That's probably about right. But again, Arkansas, if you're a Razorback fan, I know people are exasperated with the things that continue to happen. Let's go through it. Turnover issues, free throw issues. Illinois is a tough draw. Sky Clark into the portal, right? So Arkansas's had its injury problems, right? We know this is a different team. Had Trevor Brazile and Nick Smith Jr. I mean, I think vastly different by midseason. I mean, Nick Smith Jr. is still in midseason. He's just rounding into midseason kind of form, and we're at the end of the season. But Sky Clark's been out since January. He formally announced he's going to the portal. This is a big-time 5-star. I mean, it was a shock when Illinois beat Kentucky for him, but that's what happened. He's out. Jaden Epps, one of their top players. We're going to talk about some of the players for Illinois here in a minute. But Jaden Epps, a guard, had been in concussion protocol. He just got back for the Illini's first-round game against Penn State in the Big Ten tournament. And they lost that game. We know Penn State made it all the way to the finals against Purdue, the conference tourney finals. But Epps had been out, so he returned and played off the bench in that game. He's one of their key guys. But he'd been out for a couple of games in, like I said, concussion protocol. So here's a team also that's been grappling with some late season stuff. I think for Arkansas, when I look at the matchup, there are several things that come to mind. Illinois is a poor free throw shooting team. That's been one of Arkansas's biggest problems. A 69% shooting free throw team is Arkansas. Illinois is at 68%. When you look at some of the other stuff, Illinois is a better rebounding team. It's a better team converting inside the arc, 2-point percentage. Arkansas is actually slightly better. As bad as Arkansas is shooting from three, just over 31%. The Illini are a little worse at just under 31%. It's pretty close. But they do have a lot of guys that are going to take them, and guys that Arkansas is familiar with. I mean, they've got guys that'll step out and knock them down in volume. They shoot a lot and they miss a lot. But you've got Terrence Shannon Jr., who's the all first team All Big Ten this year. Guy averaging over 17 points a game. Hog fans remember him at Texas Tech 2 years ago. 20 points in that second round of 32 in Indianapolis. Remember, that was COVID. That was the everybody was in their own bubble. It was like a bubble setting in the hotels, and that was the way it played out. And Arkansas beat Texas Tech. That was a tight game. Shannon had a big game in that one. I know he knocked down some threes in that one. I think he finished with 20 points, but Arkansas survived in advance and would go on to beat ORU in the Sweet 16. That was a buzzer beater, basically, to move on to the Elite Eight against Baylor. So you've got two guys in that NCAA tournament that Arkansas faced in that Elite Eight run that are now a big part of what Illinois is doing. In fact, they're two leading scorers. They're double-figure scorers. But when you look at Matthew the Mullet Meyer, man, what a dome with hair, man. That guy's been a mud. I don't know if he's still wearing it that way, but that's what he had at Baylor. It was really cool watching a guy with a mullet go off. But Meyer's averaging double figures, I think 12 or so points a game. Between the two of them, they're like around 115, 120 made threes combined. Think about that. That's a lot. And then you've got the couple of big men that are factored in. I mentioned Jaden Epps at guard. He's one of their key guys. He's between 35 and 40 made threes. We'll see if he should be back in the fold. He did play in the Big Ten tournament. He did not miss the tournament. It was COVID. Who didn't miss the tournament? I didn't. I'm okay. But what I'm saying is the COVID still had an impact on that NCAA tournament because of the way the teams were bubbled and sequestered into their hotel rooms, and the protocols were still in place, much more so than anything that's happened since then. But that was the first season post-COVID. COVID completely interrupted conference tournament plays the season before 2019-20, and there was no NCAA tournament. Favorite upset pick in the whole tournament? Well, if you're a Hog fan, you got to go with Howard over Kansas in the first round. That Thursday game in Des Moines, the same day that Arkansas will play Illinois. But Meyer was at Baylor. I think he's a tall forward. To me, he's got small forward skill, 6'9" guy. He's active. He'll shoot the three. He'll go in and mix it up. He's one of those guys that reminds me a little bit of Devontae DiVincenzo. I'm not sure I got his first name right. But who played at Villanova for Jay White. He's bigger, but that same kind of intensity. They're just pests, and they're everywhere, and they're confident players. I never understood fully why Meyer left that Baylor program, but he did. He left it, and he is at Illinois and having a really solid season along with Shannon, who I mentioned before. So Arkansas faced both of those guys. I know Meyer hurt Arkansas, if I'm pronouncing that right, Meyer, but he hurt Arkansas in that elite game as well. He wasn't one of their top performers, but he factored in and he put up some stats. I mean, he didn't just score a little bit and rebound. He did a little bit of everything. And then you've got the big man, Coleman Hawkins. He's been around for a while. His name's been out there, but he can stretch the floor a little bit. He's averaging right at 10 points a game, maybe just a little under that. But he leads the team in rebounds at over 6 a game, leads the team in assists at 3. He's got over 30. He's got at least 30 made threes this year, so just about a 3 per game for him. He's going to step out and test you, and he can pass a little bit. So there's, I'm not going to put him on the level of a Jalen Williams. He's not that quality of talent, but there's some qualities about a big guy that's 6'10" that can step away from the basket and give you some matchup issues and draw your bigs out. So you got to figure out, Arkansas's got to figure out how they're going to defend, especially in pick and roll and pick and pop, because it opens up things in two-man game and how you want to run that. And so I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on. There's another 6'10" guy that's His first name starts with a D. I've gone blank. Last name does too. We'll just call him Double D for now. But he's 6'10" and weighs 270. So this. You start thinking about Big Ten basketball, and there's always usually some big plotters, and there's going to be big guys that can throw their weight around. And Arkansas's got size on the front line, and guys that are willing to go to battle. We know Kamani Johnson is. We know the Mitchell twins. They probably do better against they do better against front lines that don't have a extreme length and quickness and explosive ability. They seem to do better against guys that are just a little bit plotters, they can't necessarily out quick them, and they can match them in length and height. So we'll see how these matchups go with those guys with Kamani. We'll see if Jalen Graham factors into it. Arkansas's got to get better defensively. This is really where Arkansas has turned the corner in a wrong way, because all year long the problems have been the same for the Razorbacks. Those have been not taking care of the basketball consistently, and for the most part, just a poor team when you look at turnovers. A poor free throw shooting team for the most part. The 69% says it all. And then I think some of the other issues are obviously they can't shoot from three. They're not a good three-point shooting team. And in games even where they'll hit a few, it probably means they're taking too many. 5 of 20 in the last game against A&M. Too many. That's too many. 5 of 12 in the first half. They shaved that down a little bit in the second half. And they took more shots in the second half. They just went cold. I don't know if they hit a wall, if it was legs, what it was, but Arkansas did not shoot well in that second half, and the whistles were blowing. They were flying like crazy early, and I thought Arkansas got a little tentative. I thought those whistles softened them up on defense, because in the first half they actually defended well. Blocking shots, 9 blocked shots, 5 steals. I'm going through the team weaknesses that I've talked about already: free throws, turnovers, and three-point shooting. But I think those are specifics in the game. A lot of times rebounding is an issue for Arkansas. It was, a tale of two rebounding stories in the SEC tournament. Dominated the glass against Auburn, got crushed against A&M. But I don't think that the boards are what did Arkansas in that game. I think it was the fouls and just the heavy, heavy whistles, lopsided in favor of A&M in that second half. Aggie shot 2 free throws in the first half, 22 in the second half. You're going to lose most games when that's the case. Arkansas shot 10 free throws in the first half, 9 in the second. That was about equitable. When you look at the foul calls in the first half, it was just a difference of 1. But we've seen games like that where Arkansas, things start to implode in the second half, and their defense, either because the whistles are blown and they're fouling a lot, they soften up and they're tentative, and so things start to snowball. So defense has been a problem overall, first and second halves, when you look at these last stretch of games. Except for really in the SEC tournament, they didn't really have a major collapse until second halves defensively at times, which kind of mirrored some of their struggles when you looked at the Baylor game on the road and Missouri on the road. So you can go all the way back to pre-Nick Smith returning to the team, and after, some of the same issues are playing out. Anytime you're a shaky team, just taking care of the basketball and shooting free throws, I think you can survive if you're playing really sound defense, really solid defense. I think you can survive not being a good three-point shooting team. Arkansas did it last year, did better than survive. But you combine that with poor free throw shooting, poor taking care of the basketball, and then you have a propensity to foul and put the other team on the line where they don't even have to really earn points. They can go shoot free throws. I think those things this time of year are very problematic when you're consistently having those problems. Very problematic because everybody's a good team now, or at least on par with you. You don't, so there's not a lot of, once you got into conference play, you didn't really have any nights off, but now it gets ratcheted up even more because the stakes are higher. Arkansas is still a young team. When I look at their backcourt and how the backcourt, some of these areas I'm talking about really fall a lot with the backcourt when we talk about ball protection, valuing possessions, and shooting at the free throw line. When Arkansas's guards are their highest percentage guys, they have too many off nights or stretches of games where things are starting to fall apart in other areas, and then they can't even step up and knock down free throws to kind of stem that tide. And so I think a lot of that is still youth factor. This deep into the season, a lot of these teams have thrown, veteran backcourts at Arkansas. Overall veteran teams, to be sure, but a lot of veteran backcourts, and I think that's been problematic for Arkansas. I think the biggest disappointment, though, if I had to pick one thing out, because it's easy to say blowing these big leads. I think the biggest disappointment, though, is I don't think Arkansas has been as sound defensively consistently in this stretch of losing. And that's where the two previous teams under Eric Melsman, no matter what else was going wrong, that's where those teams were good. All right, welcome. I'm glad you're here. We'll be on TBS. Yeah, I haven't looked at I have not looked at the television for this yet. I'm glad someone because there's a million channels, True TV, TBS, they're all over the place. But that's one that most people will have if they've got cable. How did Muss address Devo's double technical? I don't know. He played, didn't he? he still played. We're not going to get into stuff that they're doing behind the scenes. Devo's been with Muss every step of the way for the success in this program. And, that's not something that's going to bring him down in the eyes of the coach and vice versa. Devo's not going to be mad at the coach if he did say something to him and whatever that was, but you just move on at this point. At this time of year, you're not focusing on that. You move on and that's something that happened and, that hurt. That was something that was a big part of Arkansas's downward spiral in the second half against Kentucky. We can go through so many of these games where Arkansas had leads and squandered them, and games where they were close and something like that happened and now they're not so close. Things have gone south. Thank you for telling me that. I appreciate you saying that about the content. What's your read on Brazil? I didn't that faded away before I got to read it. If Mike Anderson were still the coach, Arkansas will be the overall number one seed. Yeah, that sounds right. In seriousness, someone's asking me about my feel on Brazil. Look, there's not a mock draft out there that has Brazil moving on. Not one. If there is, I haven't seen it. I've been checking them, and I haven't. If there's one that's come out in the last couple of days, but things can change when we start talking about NCAA tournament this time of year. Things are going to really start speeding up with portal, other things, and all it takes is for one team to express through back channels that they're going to draft a guy, sight unseen. Knowing that there's an injury, that they're going to take him and guarantee him money. That's all it takes to change things. So right now, based on what I see, I think Brazil's coming back. I think that's probably the most likely scenario. But again, things can change, and I just mentioned how that works. It's worked for the past 2 years. That's how things have happened the last 2 years affecting Arkansas. You can figure out the names. I don't have to tell you, but if you can't figure it out, well, then you're not paying attention, reading between the lines. But that's how it happens sometimes or often. And so all it takes is one team. A lot of these agents are working this stuff, man, and they have connections and relationships with some of these teams and their GMs and different things. And so a lot of these things happen pretty fast. And, and then the next thing you know, they snowball. The next thing you know, you're hearing about a player is going to the draft and all the fans are going like, he's not ready for the NBA. Everybody's up in arms. This is crazy. It makes no sense. It always makes sense when there's money talking. And if there's a guarantee, even if it's second round, a lot of these guys they bet on themselves. And the truth is, even with an NBA coach like a guy with the experience Eric Melsman has and his understanding, in most cases, you're better off if you're going to get that guarantee to go to, even though you're not truly ready to maybe be a force in the NBA or impact, to get your training with the pro people, because that's a faster track. They have different rules. It's basketball, but there's different rules in the game. It's played a different way too. Fouls are called differently. The shot clock's different. There's all of it's different. And so you're better off going in that world if you're going to get that guarantee and get started. So we'll see what happens. That's a long way to answer what I think is going to happen. I think based on what I know right now, I think Brazil's coming back. I could have a different opinion later tonight or tomorrow based on stuff I get, because I talk to a lot of these folks and nobody's buzzing about it right now. And this is a guy that was hurt. He's still dealing with that. But we've seen guys get hurt and not come back and get drafted. And so we'll see. But a lot of times those are guys that are that are their valuations are much higher, and there aren't any true can't misses. But some of these guys, a lot of these decision makers feel are close enough that they'll gamble. I don't know that you could say that about Trevin, so I think that adds something to the mix. Although I think fully healthy, he's a can't miss NBA guy, and I thought before he got hurt, he was definitely a first round value at some point. Very likely at the end of this season. Very likely at the end of this season. But that's how it is right now. So we know he's dealing with injury. I still think Nick Smith Jr. and Anthony Black, based on the conversations I'm having behind the scenes, are lottery picks. That could change. Other guys are playing well right now too, and so there'll be some jostling and movement. They're definitely both first rounders, and probably if they don't stay in the lottery, either one or the other wouldn't slip far. I don't see either one of them slipping past 20, but I think they're both still in great lottery shape as of now. We'll see what happens with Jordan Walsh and Ricky Council. I've talked about those guys. I think Jordan Walsh, I really like Jordan Walsh and his evolution to this point. I know people see 5-star and maybe not all 5-stars are the same. He's a guy whose skill level, he's continuing to work on that. And I think right now, just moving that another few notches is what's missing for him as a potential first rounder. But again, all it takes is one or two teams to say, come on, man, come to the league. We're going to guarantee you money, whether it's late first, early to mid second round. And so when we talk mid second round, that runs all the way up to the 49th pick. That's where Isaiah Joe went to the Philadelphia 76ers 3 drafts ago.